Hi, Perry. It's time to read with Grandma Becky. Oh, I can't wait for you to hear this book. And look what I have on my head. I have bunny ears, and these bunny ears belong to your mommy when she was a little girl. And every Easter, and she still puts them on. And she wears them at Easter time, and she would go around with her Easter basket and find all the treats left by the Easter bunny. And I hope when you come to visit Grandma Becky that you can wear the bunny ears too. So they'll be here waiting for you. Today's book is written by one of my favorite authors, Beatrix Potter. And Beatrix Potter lived in England, and she wrote many little books for children. You can see how teeny tiny this book is. And she wrote about all kinds of creatures that live in the wood behind her house. And this one is called The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. And Beatrix Potter also illustrated all of her own books. So here's the story of the tale of Benjamin Bunny. One morning, a little rabbit sat on a bank. He pricked his ears back and listened to the trick-trot of a pony. A gig was coming along the road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in her best bonnet. And there's Benjamin. As soon as they had passed, little Benjamin Bunny slid down the road and set off with a hop, skip, and a jump to call upon his relations who lived in the wood at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. That wood was full of rabbit holes. And in the nearest sandiest hole of all lived Benjamin's aunt and his cousins, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Old Mrs. Rabbit was a widow. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffettes. I once bought a pair at a bazaar. She also sold herbs and rosemary tea and rabbit tobacco, which is what we call lavender. Little Benjamin did not very much want to see his aunt. He came around the back of a fir tree and nearly tumbled upon the top of his cousin, Peter. Peter was sitting by himself. He looked poorly, and he was dressed in a red cotton pocket handkerchief. "Peter," said little Benjamin in a whisper, "who has got your clothes?" Peter replied, "The Scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden," and described how he had been chased about the garden and dropped his shoes and his coat. Little Benjamin sat down beside his cousin and assured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out in his gig, and Mrs. McGregor also, and certainly for the day because she was wearing her best bonnet. There they are, sitting together, talking. Peter said he hoped that it would rain. At this point, old Mrs. Rabbit's voice could be heard inside the rabbit hole calling, "Cottontail, Cottontail, fetch me some more chamomile." Peter said he thought he might feel better if he went for a walk. They went away hand in hand and got upon the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the wood. From there, they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were plainly to be seen upon the Scarecrow, topped with an old tam-o-shanter of Mr. McGregor's. The tam-o-shanter is a hat. Little Benjamin said, "It spoils people's clothes to be squeezed under a gate, and proper way to get in is to climb down a pear tree." Peter fell down head first, but it was of no consequence, as the bed below was newly raked and quite soft. It had been sown with lettuces. They left a great many odd little footmarks all over the bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs. And clogs are a type of footwear that you wear on your feet. Little Benjamin said the first thing to be done is to get Peter's clothes in order so that they might be able to use the pocket handkerchief. They took them off the scarecrow. There had been rain during the night. There was water in the shoes, and the coat was somewhat shrunk. Benjamin tried on the tam o' shanter, but it was too big for him. Look how silly that hat looks on top of that bunny. Way too big. Then he suggested that they fill the pocket handkerchief with onions as a little present for his aunt. Peter did not seem to be enjoying himself. He kept hearing noises. Benjamin, on the contrary, was perfectly at home and ate a lettuce leaf. He said that he was in the habit of coming to the garden with his father to get lettuces for their Sunday dinner. The name of old Benjamin's papa was Old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. The lettuces were certainly very fine. Peter did not eat anything. He said he should go home. Presently he dropped half the onions. Little Benjamin said that it was not possible to get back up the pear tree with the load of vegetables. He led the way boldly towards the other end of the garden, and they went along a little walk on planks under the sunny red brick wall. The mice sat on their doorsteps cracking cherry stones. They winked at Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. Presently, Peter let the pocket handkerchief go again. And look what happened. There goes the onions. They fell out. They got amongst flower pots and frames and tubs. Peter heard noises, worse than ever. His eyes were as big as lollipops. He was a step or two in front of his cousin when he suddenly stopped. I wonder what made those noises. This is what those little rabbits saw round the corner. Little Benjamin took one step, and then, in half a minute, less than no time, he hid himself and Peter and the onions beneath a large basket. Oh, look, what was there? Not a good thing to have happen. The cat got up and stretched herself and came and sniffed at the basket. Perhaps she liked the smell of the onions. Anyway, she sat down upon the top of the basket. Oh no. Remember, Benjamin Bunny and Peter are inside the basket. She sat there for 5 hours. I cannot draw your picture of Peter and Benjamin underneath the basket because it was quite dark and because the smell of the onions was fearful. It made Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry. The sun got round behind the wood, and it was quite late in the afternoon, but still the cat sat upon the basket. This is a big problem for those bunnies. At length there was a pitter patter, and some bits of mortar fell down the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Mr. Benjamin Bunny prancing along the top of the wall, the upper terrace. He was smoking a pipe of rabbit tobacco and had a little switch in his hand. He was looking for his son. There's the bunny. Old Mr. Bunny had no opinion whatsoever of cats. He took a tremendous jump off the top of the wall and onto the top of the cat and cuffed it off the basket and kicked it into the greenhouse, scratching off a handful of fur. The cat was too much surprised to scratch back. That's one brave bunny. When old Mr. Bunny had driven the cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he came back to the basket and took out his son, Benjamin, by the ears and whipped him with the little switch. Then he took out his nephew, Peter. Then he took out the handkerchief of onions and marched out of the garden. When Mr. McGregor returned about half an hour later, he observed several things which perplexed him. It looked as though some person had been walking all over the garden in a pair of clogs, only the footmarks were too ridiculously little. Also, he could not understand how the cat could have managed to shut herself up inside the greenhouse and locking the door upon the outside. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him because she was so glad that he had found his shoes and coat. Cottontail and Peter folded up the pocket handkerchief, and old Mrs. Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them up from the kitchen ceiling with the bunches of herbs and the rabbit tobacco. The end. So, Perry, I hope you enjoyed this wonderful Beatrix Potter book, The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. Love you. See you soon.